Okay, let me just show you how you can apply the wind. So I have two different styles of wind. So for the trunk, of course, we need to only bend our trunk. For the branches and the needles and all that stuff, we just do like a simple grass wind node. So what you need to do is, first of all, you need to create a new folder inside your content. So right click and make a new folder called wind. Once you did that, you want to start by creating a so-called mpc_wind. How can you get this? Right click and then you go to material, and then you have a material parameter collection. Click on that and call this one mpc_wind. Once you open that, you're going to have something which is looking similar to something like this. You're going to have a scalar parameter and you're going to have a vector parameter. You want to click on the plus for the scalar once, and you want to click on the plus for the vector once. Once you click on the scalar here, the plus, you're going to have an index. Please call this parameter wind intensity and get a default value of, for example, 2 works quite fine. So this is everything for the index within our scalar parameter. Okay. Then you click on the plus here to get a vector parameter, open this one up, open up the index, and you call this one wind direction. And as for the default value, when you open this one up, just get the green channel to 1, and that's it. Okay, and then save that. So we have 2 parameters for the wind intensity and also for the wind strength. For the wind intensity and for the wind direction. Sorry for that. So the wind direction you see is we are using the green channel. You can also use the red channel and set this to 1, so you have a red value. In this case, I'm just using the green value. It doesn't really matter. It just means depending on the X or Y, so red or green, it just means we have a value of 1, which would be maybe red or green, so X and Y, and this is just getting our direction. Okay, so according to our pivot point or a pivot direction. Once you have your mpc_wind, right click here, go to material, advanced, and get a material function. Call this one mf_wind. Open this one up, and I will explain to you in detail what you need to do. You only have an output, right? Just get some space. Just start here and make yourself comfortable here and having enough space. What you need to do first is you need to implement your wind intensity. So what you can do, you can right click and type in collection parameter. Just get this one. Or you can also just drag inside this one here. It doesn't really matter. It's the same stuff. But in this case, you have to define the MPC wind here on the left-hand side, and the parameter name, would be, we start with the wind intensity. So the red value, it must be a red value. Once you have this, you want to make sure that you hit this one up with a multiply. So just press M and click. You put this one into a multiply. Right click on the B channel, promote a parameter, and you call this one wind strength. Okay? And you can just leave it like so. Just drag select and press Q, and then it's all straight. After this, you get a so-called simple grass wind. And that one would be for your intensity, so this is perfectly fine. Then right click on the wind weight, promote a parameter, and you call this parameter wind weight. And I use a default value of 0.25, okay? As for the speed, right click here, promote a parameter, and call this one wind frequency, or speed, doesn't really matter. And for the wind frequency, I'm using a value of 0.2. As for the additional world position offset here, our vector 3 input, just press 1 and click, and just hook up a 0 value here. It's perfectly fine because we don't use that. And we're just avoiding this input, but it's connected, at least. Okay, so now we have built this. Pretty simple stuff. And it just took you maybe 90 seconds. After this, you can hook up a so-called vertex color. Okay, just type in vertex color. Together with the M plus with a multiply, but you put this into the B channel. Pretty important. And this one, this whole logic you just created, you put this inside the A channel. So this is what you already prepared now. Okay, and you can just leave it like so. For now. Once you have this, everything until the multiply, so until here. Okay. You just put this one up here so you can see better. Just put this here. Once you have this stuff, once you build that until the multiply, you want to make sure to continue on the bottom, so just below, just start here maybe. You want to get a so-called object pivot point. Object pivot point, this one here, from the mesh particle pivot location, okay? From there, you want to drag off and you search for the dot product. Just drag select and Q to make it straight, like so, okay? You need to connect the B, so what you need to do is you need to get a 3 and click, so press 3 and click. And then on the left-hand side, or just double click here, it doesn't really matter, you can just set the green channel to 1, because we want to make sure we have a green channel activated. Then the dot is fully connected. Drag off of here and just get a divide node. And put this divide node to 2. In my case, I set this to 2 because this works quite nice. And then after that, from here, drag off of here and type in add. You get an add node. In this add node, just right click and get a time node. We want to swing the trunk. For this, we just need the time value. After the add, we want to define like how fast or how slow this bend frequency needs to be. So M and click to get a multiply, put this into A. And for the B, now we can promote this one to a parameter and we call this one the bend or the swing frequency for our trunk. And the value here is 0.1, okay? I just put this to 0.1. Let me put this one down here so we have a little more space. After that, drag off of here, and then you need to get the sine wave. The sine wave is mandatory to get this swinging animation, okay? So going back and forth, back and forth. And then after that, you want to make sure that you hook this one up to another add node. And then down here for the add B input, promote this one to parameter and call this one bend angle. This is your bend angle. And I set this to 1.5. After the add, you want to make sure that you get another divide, hook this one up, and you need to put this also into the bend angle. Or I should say, you also need to use the bend angle and hook this one into the divide as well. So for the add and the divide, you connect the bend angle. After this, you want to make sure that you get another multiply, put this into the A input of your multiply. You can see here. Now, you need to get the wind intensity. So what you can do, this is what you created in the beginning, right? So this whole chunk you have this already on top. You can just copy this wind intensity, Control C, okay? And you get this one here, put this one on the bottom. You want to make sure that you connect this one to a so-called divide node. So drag off of here, divide. And here, right click for the B input, and you call this one bend intensity. And in my case, I just used a value of 120. The lower the value, the stronger your bend will be in this case, by the way. Perfect. So now you have this multiply here. And now you can hook up the wind intensity here connected with the divide and put this into the B of your multiply input. We are almost done. You just need to get the rotate about axis. Rotate about axis. This is what you need. You see here, but it's not really connected. So you can just control and drag and you put this into the rotation angle. Okay. So this whole logic you just created here is all for the rotation angle. Then you right click here, collection parameter. You get a collection parameter. But in this case, you want to make sure that you get the wind direction, the green one here. And then drag off of here and you get a normalize node. Drag select and press Q to make it straight. And this one would be our normalized rotation axis. Pretty simple stuff. Then you have a so-called world. It's pretty simple to hook up. World position. So this would be our absolute world position. And the XYZ goes into the position. And as for the pivot point, which is left, you can see here, we have a so-called object pivot point. And you get, again, the mesh particle pivot location. And you put this into the pivot point. You have this one already here in the beginning. So you can just copy this, or you just type in object pivot point and get the mesh particle location and put this into the pivot point. Right. So now you have all this logic as well, this whole logic. Now you need to get all this logic you just created, and you need to hook this one up into a multiply. So press M and click. So here, multiply. And you want to make sure that you multiply this with the so-called bounding, just right click and get bounding box based 0 to 1 UVW. And you want to make sure that you use the blue channel. So this is our vertical, okay? So our Z value, basically. Blue channel is Z value. So the vertical, so our trunk can rotate or have this slope animation properly. And then you can see this is being multiplied with this whole logic we have here. All right, perfect. So now you remember that I told you need to get your vertex color and hook this one up to a multiply, right? So this one here, this is something you have on top, okay? So now basically what you do, let me just get my existing one. So this is what I already did, so don't focus on this. But this is what you created, right? Now we have all this logic here. Now you just need to combine this. How can you do this? You drag off of here after the multiply of your vertex color and get an add. Just get an add node. I hope that I'm not confused. Yeah, okay, this is perfectly right. And then you get this whole logic on the bottom here you created. From the multiply, you put this into the B of your add node, okay? And then you have an output here, right? So this node you can see here, this blue node, should be here. This is the output. Before you can hook this one up to the output, there's something in between. Static switch parameter. Get the static switch parameter. And you call this one trunk, question mark. Or you can call it is trunk or is it trunk material, this is just a check for you, okay? And you need to control click and swap this into the false. So this whole logic on the top here goes into the false actually. So if this is a trunk, if this is true, we wanna use this logic instead. So this just means that you could create a cache here. So drag off of here and get a named reroute decorrelation node. This is what you can do. And you call this one trunk. anim, for example. So now this is just a cache. Now you can, on the top here, right click, open up the named reroutes, and you get the trunk anim, and you hook this one up to true. This is what you can do just to save a little bit of spaghetti. Or if you don't want to create a cache, you can just hook this one up directly into true. There's no difference, actually. Good. And I believe that this is it. Yes, I believe this is it. So you have now everything here. Rebuild. Or just make sure that you make a screenshot or something. I will just make this a little bigger for you here. So yeah, feel free to also just make a screenshot of this. But I explained to you every node, how to connect it. And yeah, this is now your mf_wind. Okay, this is pretty important that this is going to look like this. Pretty important. All right. So let me just delete all that, what I just rebuilt together with you. And that one would be your material function. Perfect. Let me just save. Now what you can do, or what you should do, is you go back to your Black Spruce, your materials, and now you do have materials for, you have two material instances, mi trunk and the mi needles, and you have for all the other ones, dead branch, knots, main branch, all that stuff, you have the base material. You need to just avoid the mi. Don't go into the material instance for now. It's easier and it's faster in this case to just go into each material itself. Just open up the trunk, then the small branch, then the needles, then the main branch, then you open up the m knots and the m dead branch. Just avoid the material instance. Because for each material here, you need to go to your wind, mf_wind, and drag and drop this one inside. You can just drag and drop this one inside, and then you can also just Control-C and copy it. So you don't need to drag and drop it again. And you need to hook this one up for every tree material we have. You need to hook this one up into the web position offset. So just repeat this. I don't need to save, no. And then you go to the next material of your Black Spruce. So that one would be branch. And then you hook up the mf wind, okay? Then you go to the m needles and you hook this one up as well. And then you go to the main branch and you hook this one up as well. And now what is pretty important, there's only one thing you have to do for the material instance. Your trunk has a material instance when you followed along in the previous lecture. We created a material instance for the trunk. You need to open up the material instance trunk and you need to enable the trunk. Sorry for this. One thing I forgot to mention. Sorry for that. You need to organize this. It's not organized in your case. When you open up the mf wind, you click on this static switch parameter, then control-click on the wind weight, control-click on the wind frequency, control-click on the wind strength, control-click on the bend frequency, control-click on the bend angle, and control-click on the bend intensity. Then you just rename this to wind controls. So everything you just clicked, those three parameters, intensity, angle, and frequency, and also our switch parameter, they all go into a category called wind controls. And then I clicked on the static switch parameter and put the sort priority to 0. Then I put the wind weight to, the wind strength to 1, sort priority. Wind weight to 2, sort priority. The wind frequency, sort priority to 3. And then the bend intensity to sort priority 4. The angle to sort priority 5, and the bend frequency to sort priority 6. So now this is perfectly organized. And now when you open up your MI trunk, you will have exactly something like this. Wind controls, and the first thing which is going to pop up is the trunk question mark. And you want to make sure that you enable this, and you enable this here as well. And here you can define the bend intensity, the angle and frequency, but please make sure you don't change this. Because for all the other things, you can change it. Of course, you can make this a little stronger. Maybe you set this to 100, so the bend is a little stronger. Or you want to change the bend angle. Maybe you want to make this a little slower or faster. The frequency, yes, you can change it. But then you really have to go back to the material function. And you have to update the same values here as well. Okay? So if you change, for example, the bend frequency to 0.2 instead of 0.1, you need to go into the bend frequency here inside the material function. And you need to have the same values for each of those parameters. The reason why that is because we only use those values here for the material instance of our trunk. But when we have our dead branches and anything else, it is connected in the material, but we don't change it because we don't have a material instance for the dead branches, for the main branches, for the needles. I hope you understand what I'm telling you, because once you change it only for the material instance inside your trunk will bend in a different direction or maybe faster or has a more intense bend, but everything else is not changed. So this means that your trunk is now going, how should I say, he will be completely doing his own thing, okay? So this is why all the values, they need to be the exact same for all the other materials inside the material function. And then you will be good to go. You will have something like this, okay? Good. And I made a lecture, just a quick heads up I made. I think I will just put this lecture before this lecture, makes sense. And then you probably already watched that lecture, the previous lecture, because I had to turn off the voxelization. So don't be confused. The reason why that is because once I started to create my wind and I'm almost done, this is almost my final lecture here. You have to understand. So yeah, just for you to understand, I'm almost done with the course, but this is just one lecture I sneaked in between. And then I realized everything regarding wind animation. So it like all the nanite foliage, the like the foliage from Quixel Mega Scans, our own trees we created, all the stuff, which is nanite, and we activated the nanite foliage. I told you in the previous lecture. Once we enable our own material wind, so our own vertex-based world position offset wind, the voxelization is going to break. It's not really going to break, but we get in the far distance we get horrible shading issues. And I didn't know that you cannot use voxelized nanite meshes, voxelized foliage, together with the traditional approach of using the wind inside the material. You cannot do it. It's pretty unfortunate. We have to rely on the skeleton meshes. So we have to create the bones. And the thing is, we cannot create our bones and animate our wind, because with skeleton mesh, we cannot create our own skeleton mesh animation. So the whole production pipeline is at Epic's studio, or inside Epic Studio, and they use, as I told you already, the Houdini pipeline. And so we have to rely on Epic and wait for them to make trees. And this is, this is pretty bad. So you cannot really use the voxelize once you enable wind. If you can live without wind, feel free to enable voxelization and scatter 5 million trees. But once you enable your own wind, it's gonna break. You need to disable the voxelization. Okay? So this is something you have to understand. Okay, yeah, so this is it. Just for you, just a heads up, if you want to have wind, now you have this one here, your folder wind, and now you have this one integrated, your MF wind, for each material here, like spruce, materials, and it's all integrated now. All right, perfect.